All right, perfect. So I had this idea that I want to start interviewing women that I know that have done amazing things, and I think you've done some really amazing things. And it's been a while since we actually communicated
Yeah.
and visited in person, probably like 2014, maybe.
Yeah, 2015 was the year I moved, yep, out of
Okay.
Corvallis. hmm So it
And
probably,
when was your first PCT?
so I hiked the PCT in 2015.
Yeah.
Um, I did a few other trails before that.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, 15 was the PCT.
Okay. So I can't quite remember, but I might have talked with you briefly after you did that. So it would have been later, mid to late 2015 before I moved to Michigan.
Yeah, yep.
So that would have been just maybe at the Starbucks in Albany.
I remember if that was, do you think that that was after my, yeah, it could have been. It was either after I hiked the Colorado Trail or after
hmm
uh, the PCT. I don't quite remember which one.
Okay.
Uh, you might remember better than me. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was 2014 or 2015.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Cool. So, so if you don't mind, just kind of like you can introduce yourself however you want to,
yeah.
and then uh, and then just kind of I want to hear all about how you went to or got to the place of traveling, hiking
hmm
the Pacific Crest Trail by yourself. Basically, there were others around, but like nobody went with you the whole way,
hmm
and what happened with that. But just kind of introduce yourself and maybe what your athletic experience and history was before that.
Yeah, totally. Yep. So I'm Bri, and I'm a coach now, a running coach, most specifically. And if I'm introducing myself, I would say I'm an ultra runner and a mom. And I so I hiked the PCT in 2015, and my journey with that kind of started in 2010. And that was actually the year of my very first backpacking trip ever.
Hmm.
Uh, and I kind of, on that first 2010 backpacking trip, I kind of drug my mom out with me. And I got inspired by, I was on a day hike once, and I got inspired by some backpackers and decided I was going to do it myself, and went to REI and was like, I've never been backpacking before. Tell me what to buy. And and spent who knows how much money on gear that wasn't even that good probably, and just bought whatever I buy and got all my gear, and drug my mom out on our first backpacking trip in 2010. And that was like a 3-day 14-mile trip. And leading up to that point, as long as I can remember, I've had a desire to run, but I was never any good at it. And in high school, so I graduated high school in 2009, and throughout high school, I ran, maybe 3 to 5 miles a couple days a week type of thing, until I'd get injured, which happened inevitably. And then I would get injured, and then I'd quit running for a couple months, and then I would start over again. And it was just that cycle of probably 10 miles a week of running, uh, until I'd get injured. And it was anywhere from like shin splints I would get really frequently, I had really bad knee pain, and yeah, I feel like, what else did I have? I think most of my injuries revolved around knee pain and shin splints, at least early on. But I just kept trying, and I just kept wanting to run. And so in 2010, bringing it back to the backpacking trip, I was really not in shape at all. I was in terrible shape. But I was super inspired by that backpacking trip. And so I planned another trip for the next year. And it was a little bit longer. And then the following year, I planned a 6-day, 60-mile trip, and my mom wanted to join me again. And it was just totally amazing. And I mean, we were both it was grueling hard for us.
And where was that?
That was around the Three Sisters. It was loop in Bend. And actually, I just ran that this summer in one day.
That's awesome. That's so amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So 60 miles, you said?
60 miles in 6 days. Yeah. Yep.
Wow. And then this year you ran it in one day?
I ran it, but it was a slightly different route. So it was 52 miles this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I pretty much the same route in one day as I did in 6 days, 2012.
That's so amazing. So,
Yeah.
So 8 years later, now, did it take you 8 years to build up to that, or did you just learn all kinds of tricks and like different conditioning habits that allowed that transformation?
I wouldn't necessarily say it took me 8 years to build up to that, because I'm constantly growing, and my body's constantly changing, and my fitness is constantly changing. So in a way, yes, it's taken me the whole 8 years to get to that point. But I started running ultras in 2016. So my real 2012, when I did that backpacking trip, to 2015 when I hiked the PCT, it was some kind of drastic changes in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as fitness and kind of, what I do in my, and then 2016 up to now has just been pretty much just training for races and having a baby at one point in there.
Yeah, yeah. Decided that was part of your adaptation protocol.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but so in 2000, do you mind if I just kind of tell like the story?
Yeah, so yeah, I'd love to hear, especially starting with the 2012 to 2015 transformation, and kind of like what took you from, I know you were like really focused on trying to finish school for a little bit, and then you were just like, okay, nope, I'm gonna completely change direction and go to Washington and just like change your life and change your focus. So I wanna hear all that.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so 2012 was that 60-mile 6-day trip, and I was so inspired by it. And that was the year 2012. I read the book Born to Run, which is funny because in the ultra running community, a lot of people, that was the shift in the ultra running community, was when the book Born to Run came out. And I millions of people have read that book, runners and non-runners. And I think for many, it's changed their life. I've heard a lot of ultra runners or just runners, fellow runners, say that they started running or ultra running when they read the book Born to Run. And I was one of those people. And so after I read the book Born to Run, I was like, I don't even remember if I had heard of ultra running at that time, but I was like, wow, like people do that. People run 50 miles. and 100 miles at a time, like without stopping. And I was, I mean, I can't, it opened something up inside of me that I didn't know was there until that point. And it was like this, I had to chase it. It was like not an option for me. That's the best way to describe it. It was like, didn't matter what was going on. Didn't matter that I was a almost 4-point student 3 years into college at that time. It was like, I have to pursue this. And so I did. So I started reading more books. And I think the second book I read was Eat and Run by Scott Jurek. And that's another very inspiring book. And then another book that was very inspiring to me was A Life Without Limits by Chrissy Wellington. And I just continued. I just read more and more and more books about ultra running and training. And I started getting into books like chi running and what else, like meditation, another book about meditation in running and focusing on form and all these things. And I just started digging into it, but I was still getting injured. But I just had this mindset and this drive to pursue this thing that I had just discovered that was like, I don't care that I'm getting injured. There must be a way to not get injured. There must be a way to do something different. If these people can do it, why can't I do it? And so kind of around the same time, I decided that next summer I was going to hike the John Muir Trail, and I was going to do it alone. And I had done my first solo backpacking trip that summer of 2012 as well. And I ended up doing a couple of them that summer because I loved it so much. And so I just announced, I was living at my parents' house still at the time, or I had moved back in or something. And I announced to my mom, next summer, I'm hiking the John Muir Trail, and I'm going to be doing it by myself, and it'll be about probably 20 days or maybe even up to 25 days. And this is what I'm doing. And she was like, well, I want to do it. And I was like, no way, you don't want to do 220 miles. And so she eventually she was like totally on board, and I was like, okay, we're doing this together. So my mom and I went and did the John Muir Trail together that summer, and it was ended up being 225 miles. And it took us 24 days in the Sierra Mountains in California, the high Sierras. So it was pretty high elevation for a lot of it. And it was the most life-changing experience I've ever had. Even more so than the PCT, I think, just because that was like my first time being immersed in nature for that long without anything, without technology, no cell phone service the whole time. We had to send food to ourselves ahead of time so that we could pick up food at these resupply spots along the way because there aren't any towns. And you can't carry 25 days worth of food with you at once. And that totally changed my life. And in fact, I had a boyfriend at the time, and I sent him a letter in the mail from California explaining how my life had just changed and that we weren't going in the same direction in life. And I stayed down in California with a few friends that I had met on the trail for a few days, and kind of road tripped my way back over the course of like 4 or 6 days after that. And
were
that
you
was
by yourself at this point?
Yeah, my mom flew home. Yep, she flew home right after the trail. So at that point, I was by myself, and that was also my first hitchhiking experience, which was really that's kind of been a part of my journey too, because that's part of long distance hiking, and it's really
Yeah.
fun.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So a couple things I want to comment on so far. Like, I love the fact that like your heart knew right away what like you just kind of came alive when you first read Born to Run, and you just knew this is what you wanted to do, even though you didn't have any history or any experience of like really positive running experiences.
Yep.
And then you got obsessed with it, and even though you kept getting injured, you were just determined that this was going to work out. You're like, this works for other people, it's going to work for me. I just keep believing that. And then I love how that is it John Muir?
Yeah, John Muir Trail. Yep.
Yeah, so that was kind of like your initiation,
Yeah,
um,
exactly. Was.
and you had all this clarity. So what do you think it was about that that just made you so clear about your life? Like, you probably were listening to your heart really clearly for the first time, and just like you all of a sudden had this clarity about what was in alignment with who you are and what wasn't, including your relationship at the time, and probably other things in your life. So yeah, what was it about that that brought that kind of clarity?
You know, it's hard to say exactly, except that I truly believe that nature is a part of me, and I think it's a part of everybody, you know, to some degree. But I there's some people, it's some people are drawn to it more than others, and in different ways, and I never really discovered that as a kid because, excuse me, I just grew up doing like 2 to 4 mile hikes, sometimes 6, you know, which I hated. They were really hard with my family. And that was it. I started skiing eventually, but you know, I'd ski maybe, or snowboard maybe like 4 times a year. So I wasn't like immersed in it. And it was the beauty. I mean, it was the most beautiful place I had ever been in my life. And it still is actually my very favorite mountain range that I've been to. And I've now been to, you know, a large handful of very amazing mountain ranges. And I live in the North Cascades in Washington, which they call the Washington Alps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it just left such an imprint on me. It was like I didn't even know places this beautiful existed in the United States at the time, and I obviously had that in me already because it opened up a part of me that was like, so this is what it's like to be alive and not just live. And I feel like up until that point, that's all I had done, I guess. You know, I mean, I was a good student in school and I really liked that, and I set my heart and mind to that, but that didn't make me feel alive. And I finally found this thing that made me feel fully alive. And it was like once I experienced that, I couldn't go back to just going through the motions and living and not feeling that incredible feeling of being fully alive every single day. And if I could have had my way at the time, I would have stayed on the trail for the rest of my life and never come off the trail.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which is kind of what I planned on doing, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I started planning longer and longer hikes after that, and I was just going to be a hiking bum for the rest of my life. And
So what brought the balance?
yeah, so the balance was meeting my now husband,
Mm-hmm.
and And so I mean, I know you want to talk about the PCT, but I have to kind of skip ahead
Sure.
to story. So I actually met him before I hiked the PCT, and we really liked each other, but he had just gone through a divorce and I was leaving to hike the PCT. So we didn't feel like it was the appropriate time to move forward and have anything more than a friendship where we just spent a lot of time together. And but I really liked him, and so we just went our own separate ways, and I went and hiked the PCT, and that was, you know, obviously an incredible summer. And when I came back, we got back in touch again. And actually, before I was done with the trail, we got back in touch again. And Winthrop, where I live, is the last stop on the PCT, the last town stop before you finish the trail. It's 75 miles before the Canadian border. And so all the PCT come into Winthrop, and we came into Winthrop, and I saw Aaron when I was visiting, when I still had 75 miles left, and I just knew that I wanted to be with him if it could still possibly work out. Which actually, I mean, that's saying a lot, because, you know, I was in the middle of hiking the PCT and my plan was to hike for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But it was, again, this other shift of like, okay, now wait a minute, like, you know, this is kind of new and scary, and because now I'm feeling this draw towards something other than hiking, and I again kind of knew like I wanted to pursue that, and so we started dating, and that was and then we so we started dating in 2015, the fall of 2015, and got married last year.
Yeah. Yeah. Congratulations. That's so
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. So you had had some practice listening to your heart and taking big risks to follow your heart. So like you weren't going to be able to ignore
Yep.
when life and your heart and the universe was like telling you, okay, this is actually something else that you might really like.
Yeah, totally. Yep. And I knew deep inside that as much as I loved what I had been doing for the last 3 years of long distance hiking, that I did still somewhere in there want a family and to get married and these other things. I mean, even simple things like when I would finish long hikes, I would find myself just wishing I had my favorite coffee mug to drink hot coffee out of every morning. And so the more I did it, the more I started realizing, you know, maybe I do want some other things also. But there's got to be a way to figure out how to meet both of those needs and desires and have kind of all of that in my life. And Aaron, another thing I didn't mention is Aaron in 2015 had two very young daughters. At the time they were 2 and 5. And so that was a big deal for me, because not only was I getting into a relationship, but I was, inviting young children into my life also. And so I was actually still planning on doing a long hike in 2016. I was planning on doing a 4,000 mile hike, and it would have taken about 6 months. And I started growing closer to Aaron's girls. And by the time 2016 rolled around, a couple months before I was supposed to start my hike, I started kind of faltering, and not in a bad way, but feeling like, gosh, like, what am I doing? I'm getting closer to these girls, and Aaron and I's relationship is growing, and now I'm going to leave for 6 months, and they're going to either forget about me, or I'm going to have to start from scratch in 6 months with them, because they're so young. They're going to, I don't know what they think, like, this person is out of my life for 6 months, all of a sudden she's back, and what does that mean? And so eventually I decided not to do the hike, and that was the turning point for me between, you know, I guess that was the time that I kind of like gave up long distance hiking, if you will, and I, in a bad way, but, or at least set it aside, or decided that just didn't fit with the lifestyle that I now wanted. But I also was discovering something new, which was ultra running. And as it turns out, in 2016, that spring, I did 2 ultra runs. I did a 50K, 31 mile, and a 42 mile run that spring of 2016. And when I decided not to do my long hike, I had this realization that could be my way of keeping nature and pushing my body, and pursuing what my physical limits are in my life, and also having a family.
That's so awesome. Yeah, good job finding that balance to make sure that all of your needs and goals are met, and balancing everything. And you live up in Winthrop now, right?
Yep.
And so you're right in the mountains, or have close access to the mountains?
Yeah, we're in the foothills on the east side of the mountains, but from Winthrop, it's about a 30-minute drive up to Washington Pass, which is a 5,000-foot pass, and kind of the entrance to North Cascades National Park. So we are, I mean, any which way I go, it's really amazing up here. I can drive in 4 different directions from my house and be in different wilderness areas and different mountains. And every single one of them is within an hour. So amazing. We're surrounded by mountains on all sides. And we're really lucky. And even when we don't go into the mountains here in the valley, it's the foothills. So it's really hilly and lots of rolling terrain, and there's trails everywhere. So actually every single house that I've lived at, I've had trails right out my front door.
Amazing.
Which is really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so if we missed anything, I want to hear about the time at college, and then deciding to do the PCT, and then maybe jump back forward and look at the ultra running and the ultra running training, and like coaching and all the stuff that you do with that.
Yeah, and those two actually fit together really well. There's a nice segue because I'm about to go back to school again.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I was in school from 2010 to the beginning of 2013. And so about 2.5 years. And I was a really good student, and I really liked it. And so in 2012, when I started reading all these books and went on that 60-mile backpacking trip, at the time I was pursuing nutrition in school, but I changed my major to exercise and sports science because I was just totally enthralled with it. And it was like, this is what I have to do. And so I went and changed my major to exercise and sports science, and that didn't last long until I just quit altogether to go hike.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But as it turns out, I was on the right trajectory, for sure. And I knew that I was, but I guess it was like, I want to learn all this stuff too, but I just felt this calling of like, I want to learn it, but I have to go see for myself, and I want to push my body in these ways, and I want to go see the world and the nature of the world. And so, eventually I don't fully remember all of my thought processes at the time, but I knew that I was going to hike the PCT in 2012, because on that 60-mile backpacking trip, we met some PCT thru hikers, and I started railing them with questions, and I was like, how do I do this? Tell me what to do. Like, what do I need to get? How do I train? And they were just like, it's really not that hard. You just start hiking. And that's all we did. And that's all anybody does. You just start hiking, and it's just one foot in front of the other. And actually you can do it, even if you think it's this like crazy, overwhelming goal. So at that point in 2012, I was like, I am hiking the PCT. I don't know quite when, but I am doing it. And so I knew that I wouldn't be able to be in school and hike the PCT. And so I think I just went through this process of like, do I really want to actually finish my degree right now for another 2 years, or do I want to go pursue these things myself and actually like find out for myself what all this means? And so that's what I chose. So I quit school, and started kind of my hiking journey, where I was pretty much working 60 hours a week in the winter to save up money because it's expensive. And then I'd quit working and I'd go hike for anywhere from 3 to 5 months. And then I started that process over again and went back to work and worked 2 jobs as a server, and yeah, 60 hours a week. I double shifts, like whatever it took to save up $6,000 in 6 months to then go hike again.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were training while you were working 60 hours.
Yeah. And I wasn't training. I still didn't know, I guess, kind of like what I know now as far as how to train, but it was my own form of training. And it was basically like one long hike per week. And I made sure that I had one day off from my jobs every week. And that was my long hike day, which I was gone the entire day hiking. And that would be anywhere from like 12 to 26 miles of hiking in a day training. And then during the week, I was doing short runs of, usually three up to 6 miles, and like workout videos and just whatever. I wasn't doing any like crazy specific training regime like I do now.
Yeah.
But it worked enough, at least. I was still a very new athlete, if you will. And so when you're a really new athlete, almost any form of training gets you more fit. And so I was getting fit, and I was getting fit enough to go on these hikes. And so the training worked at least well enough.
Yeah,
And then,
that's really cool.
yeah. And then I guess jumping ahead to now, how I got into coaching was another process starting in 2016, but I started going to a physical therapist who really helped me and my running a lot. And I started kind of learning from him a little bit, and then he inspired me to start thinking about how you move your body in a different way. And so I got really into kind of learning about running form and biomechanics, and yeah, just perfecting my own form, but also like watching other people and learning the correct way to move your body. And so then I think it was like the next year I ended up working for him. And I was ultra running during this time. And I started working with him doing my own PT in the end of 2015 to the beginning of 2016. And I've not been injured since then.
Amazing.
Yeah, which is really cool. And it's, most of the credit goes to him. I mean, I think that I would be in a different place, and if it wasn't for discovering this PT up here.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I started working for him, and I was going to actually get my PTA, physical therapy assistant, which is a 2-year degree. So it seemed more reasonable at the time. But long story short, that just didn't quite work out. And then I actually ended up getting pregnant very shortly after. And then some running kind of friends of mine who own a coaching company, I was interested in what they were doing. So I just started asking them in 2017 if there was anything I could help with, or any way I could learn from them, or just anything really, just however I could get involved, whether it be like volunteering at races or whatever. And so they actually at the time told me that they needed help, and that I could start kind of learning from them and doing some work trade. And so they were coaching me to run, while in turn I was, or in exchange, I was doing a few little miscellaneous kind of coaching things for them. But I started learning more about coaching and the kind of the art of coaching during that time. And I ended up becoming a full coach for them the following year. And then I worked for them for a year. And I learned a lot. I did, that first year that we were doing work trade, we did almost like an unofficial internship, where for about 3 months or so, I was going to their house or office once a week for usually about 3 hours, and just diving into everything, coaching philosophies, and just everything about coaching to learn more. And then I was also reading more books on my own, and books that they were recommending to me. And so I learned a lot in that time. And then they ended up having a business change themselves and starting to work for another coaching company. And so I kind of lost my job at that time. And I was pregnant at the time, and I was kind of like, okay, like what now? Because I knew I wanted to do that, or at least something like that. And there's very limited jobs here where I live. And so at that time, I just decided to try to start my own thing. So that's
awesome.
what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. So are there a couple of tips? Like, what were the most significant things that have kept you injury free?
Okay, well, so a few of them, to be totally honest, are too individual.
Yeah.
Share for like the broad running community, because everybody's body is different and moves different. But I can give you a few things. So the number one, I think, the number one thing that runners need to really be aware of is extension in your hips and having enough flexibility to have full extension. So extension is basically when your leg is swinging behind you in your running stride, you're in hip extension at that time. And because of our society and because most people have sitting jobs and because we drive our cars all around and then we get home and we sit on the couch and watch Netflix or whatever, and we're sitting a lot these days, and our ancestors weren't. And so I don't believe that, you know, generations back they had these same problems that we have, and I think that's the main culprit. Our hip flexors, which is in the front of our like our upper quads and kind of like lower core, shorten over time, and not just it's an evolutionary process, so it's not just in our individual lifetimes, but they have been shortening with time. And so you have to make sure, in order to have a healthy running stride, you have to be able to extend your hips behind you just as much as you're bringing your hips in front of you when you're in the motion of your stride. And most people have too short or too inflexible of hip flexor muscles and therefore can't extend. And that's a huge issue for knee pain. That was my issue. I used to have really bad knee pain, and I had what people call runner's knee. That's what it's most commonly called. But I have patella femoral tendinopathy, and it was basically because I was flexing my hips too much and not extending my hips enough, and my hip flexor mobility was really poor. So my PT had me doing a few exercises to lengthen my hip flexors, and that like was one of the main things that took my knee pain went away almost immediately when I started doing these daily stretches. So it is really amazing. I mean, anybody can do daily stretches to lengthen your hip flexors. And I'm not necessarily saying that every single person has that problem and that that's going to take away every single person's knee pain. But it's huge. It's a big culprit for running injuries. And then another kind of tip that's really easy for anybody to do is most people overstride, which is you take too long of steps and too slow of steps. So it's kind of the number one thing I give my clients. I just give people a test to figure out what your cadence is, and cadence is basically how many times you take a step in 1 minute. And most people have too slow of a cadence, which kind of plays into the whole hip mobility thing as well, because that's one way that we avoid extension.
Keeps the range of motion short.
Yep. And so that's an easy thing that any runner can do right off the bat, is just try to take steps closer to your body, keep them shorter, and make them. There's even apps you can download, an app on your phone that I forget the name of the app. I could look, but you can sync your music to so that the beat is the same cadence that you want to be running. Nice. So you're just beat of the music. So you could set it at like 170 steps per minute or 170 beats per minute, and your music will play that many beats per minute, so that you can just run in sync with your with your music. So there's tools like that you can.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to get a hold of you for coaching, how would they find you?
So my business is called Valley to Peak Endurance, and it's valley2peakendurance.com. And so that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I have a contact form on my website. I also, I'm on Instagram quite a bit, and I post on there. I have a personal account and a business account. So you can get a hold of me on there also. My business account is Valley to Peak Endurance on Instagram. To be honest, I don't remember what my personal one is.
That's okay. So I
Oh,
can add those contacts to the description box.
yeah, great.
So
Yep.
yeah, people can find you. So
Yeah.
yeah, amazing. I love your story, and I love how it's like it's not necessarily about the specifics or the details of what you chose to do. Like your story doesn't inspire a formula,
Mm-hmm.
but it inspires people to really get in touch with their own desires and their heart, and to take the adventure that comes from following that and being brave enough to just make big changes and take risks and do the
Yeah.
things that make you come alive, because then the whole story unfolds
Yeah.
through that process. So like, even though it might have, to some people or to your logical mind, it might have made more sense to stay in school for a couple more years, and put the hiking on hold, because like logistically, how is that going to get you to your goals,
Yeah.
to give up a degree for the time being, and then be in the woods for months, and
Yeah.
and yet, like, you came to life through that process, and you found your partner, and you
Yeah.
started your family, and you started your business, and like all these things have come out of just being in tune with your heart and following those desires.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. And I guess if I can add something, my biggest passion as far as coaching, and also though just kind of running myself, is inspiring people that if you think something like marathon running or trail running or ultra running is like looks fun or looks intriguing or is something that you want to do, that really truly anybody can learn how to do it. And I'm a prime example of that, because I used to just be injured all the time, running 3 to 5 miles at a time. And I had a physical therapist in Portland tell me to stop running and that I was ruining my knees and I would never be a runner. Um, and that was running about, like I said, about 10 miles a week or so. And now I pretty regularly run 50 or 60 miles a week. And I haven't been injured in 6 years, or going on 7 years. And so it takes time and it takes hard work and it takes dedication. But it's really totally possible for truly anybody.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for adding that, because that's so inspiring, and I love the obsession piece, and the determination, but
Yeah.
also that if you are doing it right and you're listening to your body,
Yeah.
you and your body can work together to keep you injury free while moving forward. And I am similar with that approach in the strength training end of things, and helping people recover from injury or energy exhaustion, and stuff that I experienced growing up. And so I love that that is your approach as well. So I hope that you keep inspiring people to get moving and to get in touch with their body and to enjoy life and live it fully the way they want to. So thank you for
Yeah.
being
Thank
here, and thanks for allowing me to interview you and share your story.
Yeah. Yep. Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll catch up again.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks.
So I am stopping the recording.